Welcome back to the AI Innovation and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Halbert. Today, I'm joined by someone whose insights on leadership have guided founders, CEOs, and change makers around the world. His name is David Siegel. David, welcome to the show. David
Absolutely.
is the author of the book Decide and Conquer. David is here to help us learn how to decide and conquer. We're going to learn how to face our the biggest challenges in our lives and come up with strategies to solve them. David's going to walk us through some of his experiences and talk about some of the projects that he's been working on to give us a better sense of how you can go into this world and make it a better place with a smile and with intelligence. David, I want to welcome you to the show. Your background as the founder of Investopedia and currently as the CEO of Meetup has made you a very, very interesting guest to have on the show. I'm really excited to just jump into things with you.
Excited to jump in as well. And the smile is real. I'm excited to be here. And intelligence, well, you'll find out whether or not it's true or not. We'll see.
Cool, cool, cool. Well, we'll definitely start off by learning a little bit about your book. So it's called Decide and Conquer, right?
Yeah, great name developed by my wife. I'm very appreciative to her for coming up with it.
Tell me, what was the inspiration for this?
Sure. Well, COVID hit, and as we all know, in 2020, and everyone dealt with COVID in very different ways. People had life goals. I had been a professor at Columbia for the last 10 years, teaching entrepreneurship and strategy. I'm running companies for also 10, 15 years. And I just love helping people to be better leaders, helping people to be more effective decision makers. I'd always believed that people struggle with their different biases in decision making, whether it's recency bias or status quo bias or other decision making biases, and it leads them astray. And I did something very atypical. Most people, when they want to write a book, they write, a table of contents, then they might write the first chapter, then they will send it out to find a book agent. So instead, I just kind of almost therapeutically decided to write about 80,000 words in Google Docs, just about my perspectives on leadership and decision making. And it was kind of a mess. And then a friend of mine introduced me to a big publisher, HarperCollins. I sent him over the big mess and he said, wow, this is a huge mess, but it's got a lot of great stuff in it. So I kind of went around the system, which is true in a lot of ways in which my whole career unfolded. That's how I ended up deciding to write a book. It was really more for therapy reasons. I'm just kind of getting out all my thoughts on different things during a time that was difficult, for the world, especially when you're running a company like Meetup, which is all about getting together in person. And you couldn't get together in person during COVID, so it made for a need to figure out what to do, and the book was helpful in that perspective.
So that's in COVID times, we weren't really able to make a lot of decisions often. We were held back, and often people wanted to delay on decision making just to see where things would go. How did that impact your flow of decision making, and what was that the contribution of that on the way that you went around writing your book?
I love it. Okay, so sometimes when people say they weren't able to make a decision, one of my big tenets in the book and in life is that not making a decision is also a decision. Meaning, too often people will push off making a decision and they'll say, oh, I'll decide later, I'll decide later. But actually, deciding to decide later is actually a decision in and of itself, which could oftentimes be the wrong decision because you lose out on opportunities.
Deci-
So I always like to challenge the assumption that people couldn't make decisions. Specifically at Meetup, we had many people when COVID first hit who said, David, Meetup is all about getting together in person. We can't allow for online Meetup events. In fact, our whole basis for our mission was we use technology to get people off of technology. So there are many people, just like you asked, Daniel, who wanted to delay the decision, who said, let's not make a decision because we need to figure out how long this thing is going to last for. There are people on my board that said that. They said, you have to keep to your mission. And then I really thought about this for a long time. And I said, what is Meetup's mission? Is Meetup's mission all about IRL? Is it all about in person? Or is the mission really, take a step back, all about connecting? And the answer is it's really all about connecting with others. It's about ending the loneliness epidemic. It's about helping people to find friends as adults and professional connections. And the only way to do that was with online events. So for the first time at meetups at the time, 15 plus year history, we allowed for online events. Since then, there's been, I think, close to 10 million online events that Meetup has had. It's about 80% in person and 20% online now. And had we not done that, Meetup would not exist anymore, because what we thought was a month or maybe 2 months ended up being multiple years. So oftentimes, I think people have an inclination to delay decisions in order to get more information. That delaying of a decision can have pretty dire consequences, and would have in the case of Meetup.
What would have been some of the outcomes had Meetup not been able to adapt to the COVID epidemic?
Oh, well, I'll tell you, when COVID first hit, we saw 100% of our events shut down in China, obviously. Then we saw in Italy, 100% of events shut down. And within a couple of weeks coming into the United States, we had 60, 70, 80% of our events shut down within a week or two. Company would have no longer existed after a couple of months if we didn't make the pivot. There's no way the company could have existed, because we had too much expense. We had too many expenses as a company. We're actually losing money as a business. We were owned by WeWork at the time. WeWork had gone from 47 billion valuation down to $1 billion valuation. And to top it all off, we were in the middle of an intense sales process. We actually sold the company in late March of 2020. So when COVID hit in, let's say, early March of 2020, we're in the final stages of a sales process, which had we not made the pivot, that sale would not have happened, and Meetup would have just been shut down, because actually WeWork had said to us that they're considering shutting the company down because we were losing money at that particular time. So it was very important to make a decision to really save the company.
Did you watch some of your competition simply fall by the wayside without the ability to respond? And what are some of the differences you think in your approach to theirs?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a couple of differences. So I'm close with a lot of the CEOs of different companies that are in our space and or related spaces. So for example, Evite. Evite is different than Meetup, of course, but Evite decided to create its own video conferencing platform and focus on the technology side. And they were able to make it through because they had a significant number of video birthdays, anniversaries, all those other types of things. But for them, their entire business is an events business as well. And without in-person events, that business is also was pained. They also ended up selling during that particular time. Another company that is a semi-competitor of ours, probably more similar than most others, is Eventbrite. Eventbrite's market cap is down about 90% since prior to COVID. They are much more focused on very large events, whereas our average size of an event is only an 8-person event. They also moved to online events, etc., but it's a very different experience to have big concerts that are online versus a small gathering of 4, 5, 6, 10 people online. Everyone ultimately moved to online events, and there were dozens of small competitors, most of whom shut down during COVID. So you know how it is. Unless you have enough strength to wither through a challenge, both, by the way, it's true on a personal level and also professional level, then the challenge is going to end up meaning the end for many of those businesses. And it did. For Meetup, we actually went from unprofitable to now, when we ultimately sold the company in 2024, we were quite a profitable business at that time. So we had about a $20 million turnaround from pre-COVID to after COVID. Part of that was because of online events as well.
Can you explain the concept of the online event and like how it actually managed to take hold to be some kind of an alternative to an in-person meeting?
Sure. So it was very interesting. So when COVID first hit, we had every one of our organizers, and we have about 300,000 organizers in 190 different countries all around the world, say to us, how do I do a running event online? We have a running group, for example. And I can understand how you can maybe have a book club online. That could work. But I do a running event online. So we contacted many different creative heads of an organizer of different groups and found out what are some of the best practices that they're doing. And what running groups, for example, did is they said, okay, we're all going to go for a run by ourselves. We're not going to run outside with people because at the time people were afraid to do that. And we're going to get back on Zoom and we'll all have a beer together after our run. And we're going to talk and hang out after our run together. So we actually created all these templates and suggestions for all these different types of events and meetup groups that weren't able to get together in person. Now, certain groups just died. And sadly, if you had a basketball group, for that ended. People didn't continue to play basketball. That's not something you could do really by yourself and then talk afterwards. And we had many groups end. And then we had certain groups, which was really interesting, thrive. So the number of tennis groups went like tripled. The number of actually badminton groups, believe it or not, ended up going up significantly. Any groups where there was some social distancing that were outdoors based ended up doing really well. And any
Like paintball?
paintball also did pretty well because of social distancing. So we ended up seeing a shift. Many of the groups that got the most hit actually were professional meetup events and tech groups. Tech groups were always the largest plurality of meetup groups and they represent about 35% of groups because people would come to the office and then afterwards they get to have a beer, pizza, and learn about AI, learn about other technologies. When COVID hit, people weren't going to the office anymore as much. So we saw a big decrease in actually tech groups. So it was interesting. Hiking groups went way up and tech groups happened to have gone way down. So we saw a lot of shifts. But the other thing that we did is created something we never had before. It's called Meetup Live, where every single week and sometimes multiple times a week, we would share best practices by different organizers to help other organizers of how to be more successful. So we actually had the head of all Zoom training globally give best practice on how to do breakout rooms, how to engage your audience. I started a podcast as well with best practices on how to pivot your meetup group. It's called Keep Connected. So I think if you're going to do a pivot, the most important thing is to help to support that pivot with education, with best practice sharing, with templates. And that's what we did. And that's how we really saved the company.
Oh, wow.
All of it is as well. That's why
It's
I
fun.
did the therapy of the book. You could tell, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just kind of like, hold on, let me see what happens if I actually pull the whole idea out and see what it looks like. And like, when we're working in our brains, we can splice and dice things because we have time, we have like deadlines, but a book is like an opportunity to see how far you can take it. You're like surfing your own mind. It's really cool. So what I'm hearing are two different aspects here. There's the decision and then there's the application. The process of decision making seems to not just be about yes, no, make a choice, like playing time chess with the timer. We're talking about having a very deep awareness of what are the resources at hand, what are the constraints, and then within that frame, you have to start figuring out what to do and move things along. So I'm trying to imagine what it would have been like for you. Let's say like on the day where you got this report that the world is basically going up in a crazy situation with COVID. So what was your initial reaction? How did it hit you? And then what did you do to kind of get through that?
Sure. So actually, I was at an APAC conference, believe it or not, in early March,
Oh
which was one of the last in-person events probably in the Jewish community.
boy.
And we were in a small room and everyone was talking, hugging each other. And it was a, meaningful experience. I go back to the office and there was a friend of mine who was also at the APAC conference, who also worked at Meetup. And he ended up being the first person, this is terrible, but hospitalized in New York City as a result of COVID. And a big article came out and it said, WeWork and Meetup have to have first office shut down due to COVID. I was like, oh, wow. The gods are really loving us here. That was my introduction to COVID. As I said, I think when you've been in business enough to understand that when everyone gets frenetic, everyone gets stressed out, that's the time for a leader to be as focused as possible. I really don't think I was overly stressed, or I was just like, okay, what do we need to do to get to the next step? And the answer was we need to roll out an MVP, a minimum viable product to allow for online events. We got everyone together. I made a unilateral decision essentially while I got some people's feedback and I said, this is what we're going to do. We have to get online events going the next day or two, or the entire company is going to be problematic. We ended up finding a country. So all events, the way our infrastructure works, are tagged to a specific location. And to decouple that would have taken many, many months to try to decouple an event from a location. We ended up finding one location where there hadn't been an event in a couple of years, like the Faroe Islands somewhere off the coast of wherever the Faroe Islands were. And that was tagged as a location. So for the first 6 months, every single online event was actually in the Faroe Islands, but no one knew. And then we had to also decouple and create standard time. And because if you lived in Berlin and you went to a Berlin meetup, you're not thinking about different time zones. We never had time zones in Meetup. It just wasn't a thing. So again, we had to hack our way into figuring some of the stuff out. But I kid you not, within 48 hours of making the decision, we rolled out an MVP product on a tech infrastructure platform that had been around for about, in some instances, close to 10 to 12 years. And again, that saved the company to be able to enable that. And we got hundreds, maybe even thousands of emails and appreciations. People said things like, if not for Meetup, I don't know what I would have done. I'm by myself in my home. I'm connected to our group. It's my greatest source of community. And this is when I need community more than anything else. Thank you for enabling online events. And then I participated in multiple online events a week. I went to a ecstatic dance online event where normally it's in one location. I think it was St. Louis. And they had like 7 to 8 different people in a park doing ecstatic dancing together. This one I showed up to, and there were 25 people from like 9 different countries, all doing this whole experience together. And so it enabled people who didn't have the type of community and experiences in a city to be able to participate in events anywhere across the world. So there was a lot of positives that ended up actually coming from it. And it was obviously stressful for all, not the least of which because I had personally done a management buyout of Meetup out of WeWork by pulling in a couple of tech leaders that I had known for a while. And so there was the whole corporate governance and acquisition element that was happening at the exact same time. But it all ended up working out, I think, for everyone.
So could you say that basically you reincarnated Meetup as a startup, and within 48 hours you brought the product to market? You launched your product?
I think that's probably true. I mean, you have to. I mean, listen, I've been teaching the lean startup for 10 years between Pace University and Columbia. I love moving fast and breaking things and trying to figure things out. It's very difficult to do so in a large organization, but when your back is against a wall, you have to do it. And then there's a concept of never fail to take advantage of a crisis. And I think we took advantage of a crisis by innovating on something that could have taken years or never because of certain pre-existing beliefs about our mission. And we ultimately made the platform much better.
Fascinating. I want to delve back a little in time and get to know you from before you started to meet all of your great success, to get a better understanding of like how did you end up with your back against the wall and then actually make it through that whole scenario on top. I guess you can't just find yourself there and then succeed. Like there must be a development process that you went through before you started to see all of these successes meeting you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was an early employee at DoubleClick um, during the internet craze and the internet downfall. We're talking about 1998, 1999. And when I was at DoubleClick, we went from a couple hundred employees to a couple thousand employees, back down to a few hundred employees. So I've seen those experiences. I was an executive at 1-800-Flowers in 2008 during the during the crisis at that point in time when consumer sentiment was at an all-time low and no one was buying any luxury goods like flowers. So I think when you've been around enough and you've seen enough different crises, whether it's 2001, 2008, or even the current challenges that we have now in the market, in April 2025 around tariffs, you kind of are able to step back and know that the world's not ending. You just need to figure out the right path and you march forward with it. I think being an Orthodox Jew helps. I think if you understand that most things in life are not under your control, and how important it is to roll with the punches that you're sometimes given by higher authority, God, or the universe, whatever you want to call it. It does make handling challenges much easier than if one believes that everyone can control anything in life. That's not something that's true, and that oftentimes makes life a lot more difficult.
Fascinating. So when you were looking back at APAC and you saw that one of your associates had was like in the front of the paper, I remember that as well, that there was some kind of maybe a deeper meaning to the whole story. Like I'm just like on the top of my head, I can imagine that, a higher power would need the person responsible who would have to build the ship and then set sail to create virtual meetups would need to get started right away.
No, it was beneficial. The fact that we were impacted so significantly, so quickly, was a blessing. It was an absolute blessing, because had the impact been only minimal or taken a while for that to happen, we wouldn't have acted as quickly as we did. Because it was so severe, it was a wake up call. And that's true on a personal level too. If someone is sick physically or has mental health challenges, and it's a slow burn in one way or the other, it's a lot more difficult than if there's as an awareness moment. Then you, through that awareness moment, either mentally or physically, you're able to really make some quick change because of that realization. And what could seem like, I always say this, what could seem like curses are really blessings, and blessings could be curses, and one really doesn't ever know. And I think having that perspective, whether it's as a leader or as a father or who has a son in the Israeli army or whatever it is, it makes everything easier. When great things happen, you don't believe it's because of you. You believe sometimes it's because of lucky, or you believe that great thing may not even be a great thing. You don't even actually know. And when a terrible thing happens, for all I know, that actually is a real blessing, and it could be a positive. And I think it's important to kind of suspend our own judgments oftentimes, and then just accept the hand that we were dealt, and then work to do our best to try to make things better.
Amazing. When it comes to your family life, how do you imbue these messages into the kinds of lessons you want to teach your kids?
I think number one is being an active father is very important. So even though I was executive and running companies, I was the coach of kids basketball, teams, and that was very important to me. And having my kids see my active engagement in their lives, as opposed to just leaving early, coming home late, being tired. That's not the way that I wanted to kind of parent. um, I was very conscious about, believe it or not, leaving my phone. For many years, I left it in the car. I didn't even bring it into my house. I think the phone could be what's termed in Hebrew a yetzer hara, or
Yeah.
something that's a difficult thing to keep us from doing things that are more positive in life, known as a negative inclination. I think it's a negative inclination for me still today, as I'm staring at it. And I think you just have to be very conscious of what things create impediments between a husband and a wife, what things create impediments between parents and children, and try to eliminate those. Obviously, the concept of the Sabbath is extremely important in our religion, and it enables people to spend meaningful time together. And that was always also a very important part, of our family, whether it's singing songs or other type things. I think at the end of the day, if I'd summarize it, is just trying to be present. And phones keep you from being present. Distraction, deprioritization of family keep you from being present. And if you're able to focus on being present, and I think Judaism, as well as frankly, all other religions, help one in being present both in work and family, in marriage, etc.
So so could you speak a little bit about what your daily life is like? How do you incorporate your spirituality and your Judaism with your business life?
Sure. I've always been a very open Orthodox Jew. I remember when I was in college, there was, at the University of Pennsylvania, there were a bunch of guys who learned every day, an hour, 2 hours a day. And I learned once or twice a week, which was not nothing, learned Torah. And they took off their yarmulkes when they had their interviews. And they were worried they couldn't get their investment banking jobs or consulting jobs. And I always had said, if a company doesn't want to hire me, then I don't want to work for that company. And so throughout my entire career, I always wore a yarmulke, I always wore a kippah, and it was a wonderful thing. It was very meaningful. In fact, I always tell younger people that are struggling with that question, I say part of the reason why I was successful was because I wore a yarmulke at work. I stood out. I was 22 years old, 23 years old in the earlier stages of my career, and people remembered who I was. There were executives in the company at DoubleClick who would ask me about Israel or asking me about Jewish practices. I remember there was an executive at DoubleClick who was had his son's bar mitzvah, and he was 15 years older than me. He didn't know how to really read Hebrew or do different prayers. And we met each week for a couple of months, and we developed a special relationship because of that. That would never have happened if I didn't wear a yarmulke, and if I was not kind of externally a proud Jewish person. The type of deep, meaningful conversations that I had with people to really connect with people, which helps you in all aspects of life in terms of your career, and just becoming a more interesting person, would never have happened if I wasn't kind of an open, external type of Jewish person. So it has definitely been a very big part of my life and career. I'm blessed, for that.
I'm sure that it wasn't always easy for you. Were there any scenarios you found yourself in that it felt like it was a disadvantage?
I could tell you a interesting story. It's been long enough, so I'm not really worried about any repercussions. So I was the head of business development for a large pharmacy chain in New York called Duane Reade. A couple $1 billion in revenue, was ultimately acquired by Walgreens. And I remember I was meeting with, well, I won't say who, but one of the most senior people in the company, if not the most senior person in the company. At one point, we were negotiating something about a budget that I had for the business that I was running. And during the negotiation, at one point in the conversation, he said, "Don't Orchard Street me," which is another way of saying "don't Jew me," which is essentially, is certainly a pejorative, a negative connotation. That wasn't a great experience. I don't think it really had a negative impact on me, but I was quite surprised that he used that kind of language. Listen, there was never a point in time where I felt like because I couldn't work on the Sabbath or because I ate kosher or that it hindered my career. In fact, the early days of my career, I remember people would go to my desk and say, "David, the Sabbath is coming. You got to get out of here." I'm like, no. It's the summertime. I got much more time. Don't worry about it. The Sabbath doesn't start until later. But Jewish people would say that. Non-Jewish people would say that. It was really a beautiful thing. I still remember my first business meeting of my life. Again, I was 22 years old. I was working for a mergers and acquisition consulting firm. And we had to go to a big bank. And I said, I'm probably not going to eat anything at this meal because maybe I'll have some water or salad or something. Just want to give you that FYI in advance. And the partner who took me there smiled a little bit. And then we showed up there, and it happened to have been Republic National Bank, where the entire cafeteria is kosher. I think I've never had in my entire career a negative impact to being an Orthodox Jew. It's only been a positive from every perspective, personally, professionally, etc.
Do you think that like it's unfortunately true that that there are some people that decide that they're going to hide their spirituality simply because they don't know how to like take pride in it or how to find that internal strength to wear it and in a way to wear their beliefs in a way that can help them shine and improve the lives of those around them?
I prefer not to pass judgment on people who choose not to wear their religion on their sleeves. I think there's lots of different types of people out there. There are introverts and there are extroverts. I'm an extraordinarily strong extrovert. I'm very comfortable communicating and meeting new people and sharing very personal things, but many people aren't. And I can't fault them for being the person that they are. That's just who they are as a person. I think that they would gain from being able to connect with others in more meaningful ways by being their authentic self at work, which is, I think, really important. I think that one of the reasons why I've been successful is because I developed extremely meaningful, deep connections to the people that I've worked with and colleagues, which does help one get promoted and to move up, one's career without a doubt, just the way it is. And I think a part of that is the fact that I'm wear who I am kind of on my sleeve, and that helped. And I think people who are more introverted, it's much harder for them to move up in organizations and to be as successful leaders as well, because people want to connect to their leaders. And if you stay close to vest and you not share who you actually are, it's a lot harder to feel connected to you. So I think it's not necessarily people's fault. It's just people's natural inclinations, and they should try to work towards how they could lead as effectively as they can in the way that they're able to.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Like it definitely strikes a chord for me in terms of how complicated it could be for somebody trying to figure out how to be their authentic self, setting aside having to reconcile like religion and spiritual beliefs.
Listen, today Israel is such, unfortunately, a controversial situation that there's many CEOs of companies who I talk to all the time who are afraid to publicly visit Israel because they're worried that it will be perceived negatively by their employees. When October 7th hit, I was extremely public about my support for Israel, both online with all employees, etc. I was tried to be as respectful as I could to people who had differences of opinion as well. And these things are complicated, but the best thing to do is to not pass judgment and to invite conversations. And the more conversations that you have, usually the conversations are much better one-on-one for more sensitive topics. The more people understand each other's perspective, which I think a positive thing, rather than people only hearing each other's, only the same opinions that that they happen to hold. So I've been very public about Judaism, been public about Israel, and again, even if people in the legal team or HR team wanted to water down any public statements that I said in support of Israel after October 7th, I really didn't let that happen.
Wow. Um, um, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about being Orthodox in the business world?
Well, there's misconceptions and there's actually true conceptions. So I'll share something that I think is an unfortunate thing about Orthodox Jews in the business world. Many people had said to me, David, you're the first person that's Orthodox that I ever became friends with. I said, oh, you never work with other people who are Orthodox? And they said, no, I did, but they just always kept themselves. And they just didn't really build the same type of outreach as you did. So I think I'll talk about a perhaps correct conception first, which is really unfortunate, which is that many people that are in the business world that are Orthodox grew up going to Orthodox day schools, went to a gap year or two and learning Torah in Israel, and are ill-equipped, unfortunately, and less comfortable in building connections and relationships with people who are different than them. And I think that's correct. And it's unfortunate. And it's one of the reasons why it was so important to me to kind of change people's perceptions of let's say very religious people, that they only kind of keep to themselves, which is really unfortunate. And I think it's a big problem, actually. In terms of misconceptions that I think that people have, I think because people end up more oftentimes keeping to themselves, they will perceive them as having less interesting personalities, less complex individuals, more myopic in terms of their perspectives on things in life, greater biases, more black and white type perspectives, because unfortunately there's enough communication and relationship building. That's unfortunate, but I think it's important for people who graduate from Yeshiva University, Torah, or other schools to really find ways to connect with their colleagues that don't necessarily involve doing things that make them feel uncomfortable in any way. There's ways of connecting without doing things that make one feel uncomfortable. And I really implore all people to try to do so.
I know it must be really obvious for those that understand this principle, but what are a few examples of ways that we can connect with each other in the workplace when we feel a little bit more introverted?
Yeah, okay. So I love this from Noam Wasserman, who's the current dean of SciSim School at Yeshiva University, the business school. His brother actually teaches a class on working in the workplace in the non-Jewish world. And he says to people, what's the most important mitzvah, good deed you could do in your first day when you come into your office? And they're like, oh, put a mezuzah on my door, or, oh, make sure the fridge is stocked with kosher food. He's like, no and no. He's like, the answer is walk over to the receptionist, give them a smile, and introduce yourself. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. And it sends a larger message, which is the best things I think that people can do And the best advice I would give is be a mensch, be friendly, build relationships, let people get to know you. And good things, positive things happen from that. You could ask people to go to coffees. Most people will have coffee in any Starbucks, anywhere, any coffee place. You ask people to go to a kosher restaurant if you want to go for a lunch or whatever together. But find ways of connecting with your colleagues, and positive things will happen for yourself and also for people's perceptions of Orthodox Jews by doing so. And that's what I would say is much more important than making sure that during every lunch break, you're making sure to read the Daf Yomi. Read Daf Yomi, do Daf Yomi. It's great. Learn a section of Talmud every day, but also find ways of connecting with others.
Right, like as somebody who also does the Daf Yomi, I love to try to find a way to connect it every single day. It's never exactly easy unless you try to abstract the underlying values that they're teaching you, but you can find, and you should. I feel like if I'm not able to apply the things that I'm learning on my own time, share them with others that are not exposed to that same content, then how am I contributing to their lives? And by the way, how am I contributing to my own? Because I'm not even making use of this information that I'm gathering.
Beautiful. Very well said. Very well said.
So if you're somebody that loves to learn, or if you feel that you're more comfortable with your in-group, it might just be that you're struggling, or you're at the beginning of a process of trying to figure out how can I share all of the wonderful pieces of knowledge and wisdom that have been handed over to me and I've studied, and share them in a way that is going to be received with good grace.
Yeah, and not just share, but also learn, and have other people share what they've learned in Christianity or Islam or from secular philosophy. I mean, there's ways of taking and growing from all these different disciplines, and I think when people think that the only thing is our little world, I think it leads to a certain judgment, which is not a great way to grow and learn and connect with others.
Right on. And so, like, on that beautiful note, I'd like to kind of bring this to a close with some final reflections. And just kind of like pick a general question out of there, which is, David, if you could go back in time and give yourself like one piece of advice about leadership or career growth, what would it be?
So I would say that the most selfish thing that you could do is to be unselfish. I think earlier in my career, I oftentimes tried to succeed by doing what I thought was best for myself, by investing in businesses that I was running that probably weren't justified to be investing in those businesses. And ultimately, the truth always comes out. Businesses that are not the right business and you overinvest in them, they end up falling apart. I've been fired from different jobs predominantly because we overinvested and tried to grow something that wasn't really justified to be able to grow. And I think that the best thing you could do and the best thing that I could have done was to have taken a step back and said, you know what? This business is not the right business. Let me build something else and something different, and been more honest and authentic as opposed to just do what I thought was really in my personal best interest rather than the company's. And that's the best advice I would have given.
They're very close to each other, but there is a difference between who you are and the company that you work for. It's funny how actually how we can lose that, especially over Passover when we're trying to break free of the slave mentality and subservience, like trying to identify with who we really are. At the same time, we also want to serve society.
It's a lifelong journey, and God willing, we have many, many years of continuing to grow into the person that we are and that we're meant to be. And hopefully, everyone has that opportunity, not just in the teenage years, but I just turned 50, and hopefully, that the next 50 plus years will be a continued journey.
Amen. Lastly, where can our audience connect with you and learn more about your work?
I would say I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. Send me a LinkedIn invite. Type in David Siegel. There are many David Siegels. Type in David Siegel LinkedIn. Excuse me, David Siegel Meetup. Then you will most easily be able to find me. And thank you, Daniel. It was a wonderful conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, David. I really hope to have you back on the podcast with us again. And we learned a lot from you today. And looking forward to processing all the great information and improving my leadership and decision making skills.
Right on.
Happy Passover.